Mother of billionaire tears. Black maid's uniform. Billionaire's reaction. Shocks. All Charleston's night pressed in like a storm, heavy with perfume, champagne, and whispered rivalries. Under the glow of chandeliers, silk gowns swept polished floors, but silence ripped sharper than any violin. Celeste Warrington's jeweled hand shot forward, clutching the sleeve of Amara Davis, the black maid carrying a silver tray. Her voice cut through the hall. "You think we wouldn't notice the missing sapphire?" Dozens of eyes turned. Phones lifted. Gasps spread. Amara's chest tightened, though her gaze stayed steady. "I didn't take anything." Her words fell, fragile yet firm, against the velvet air. Celeste's lips curled into a smile too cruel to be polite. With a savage tug, the fabric tore. The sound echoed under the chandeliers, cotton splitting, dignity shredded. Laughter flickered at the edges of the crowd, while others recoiled in shock. Amara's arms crossed over her chest, trembling only from rage, not fear. Behind them, on the untouched tray, the sapphire bracelet gleamed coldly, never missing, never stolen. "Look at her!" Celeste spat, lifting the torn cloth as if it were proof. Murmurs became judgment. "Thief!" "Trash!" The words slithered like snakes through Charleston's elite. Amara's jaw clenched, but her voice, low and clear, slipped out. "You're destroying me to protect your lies." Silence thickened. At the grand staircase, Julian Warrington had risen, his hand gripping the rail, eyes locked on Amara. His mother smirked, confident his silence would finish the execution. The air itself seemed to hold its breath. He descended one step, then another. Cameras followed. The weight of his decision crushed the gala more than any accusation. Celeste's face glowed with triumph, certain of victory. But when Julian reached the marble floor, his voice, steady and unflinching, shattered everything. What he did next would leave Charleston gasping and change all their lives forever. Charleston's heat returned the morning after the gala, pooling in the Hawthorne kitchen and slowing every breath. Laila Thompson stacked china, rinsed bleach from her hands, and listened to cicadas thrumming beyond the screen. The accusation still floated through the house, slipping under doors, gathering on the back stairs like damp air. She mapped the mansion in muscle memory, from the sighing board near the library to the latch that needed a firm hip when her arms were full of sheets. She also mapped the new pattern. A vase moved so dust would show. A chore list rewritten to erase what she had done. A napkin placed crooked and later raised as proof she lacked care. Before dawn, she carried linens down the servants' stairs. The pantry light flickered because someone had unscrewed the bulb half a turn. She tightened it, wrote a line in a small notebook, and kept moving. After the last car rolled away that night, Nathanial Hawthorne appeared at the kitchen door with his tie loosened and sleeves rolled. "You should have gone home," he said. Laila poured coffee into 2 chipped mugs and slid one across the table. At first, their talks had been logistics, deliveries, repairs, and flour delays. Then he asked about her mother, and caution thinned. She told him about a nurse who worked nights, stretched paychecks, and left tiny jokes on sticky notes. He listened with both hands on the cup, as if warmth kept him from saying words he had no permission to say. The kitchen became their truce. Line, safe and small, a place the rest of the house pretended not to see. Upstairs, Victoria Hawthorne tightened her grip on order. Laila, competent and calm, unsettled the calculus. After the bracelet drama collapsed under basic scrutiny, Victoria did not apologize. She hardened. She wanted a flawless house, and Laila's presence insisted people look twice. Charlotte Brooks drifted through rooms like perfume, light yet pervasive. She laughed easily, touched forearms, and placed little worries as if she were delivering favors. "So poised," she told a bridge partner, "almost as if she's practicing a role." To the seamstress, she murmured, "Do we lock the closet at night? It would be a shame if something wandered." Seeds fell wherever. The soil looked loose. She pressed tablecloths until they gleamed, set crystal and polished brass until it threw back a patient shine. Twice in 1 week, spilled wine was blamed on her, though she was across the room. She logged each incident with the hour and which hand stood nearest. The notebook filled, a paper wall against a storm she felt but could not see. On breaks, she stood beneath live oaks and let Spanish moss shade her eyes while thunder crawled along the harbor and never broke. Porch lights glowed, buses steamed, and children tugged at mother's hands near the corner store. She loved the city's stubborn warmth even when it made her skin itch. Nathanial shifted around her. In boardrooms, he traded forecasts and softened hard men. In the kitchen, he watched her more than he watched his phone. When a message from his mother buzzed, his jaw locked before he slid the device away. "There's pressure," he said once, voice low. "Family expects a story that looks a certain way." "What do you want?" she asked. He stared at the coffee as if it might answer. "Something honest, something I don't have to perform." Footsteps creaked overhead. He stood and cleared his throat. "Thank you for the coffee," he said, as if gratitude could hide other meanings. Morning brought fresh sabotage. A bowl of keys migrated to her cart and was later discovered with theatrical surprise. A guest's scarf appeared in the wrong drawer. When a waiter stumbled and sloshed red sauce, Victoria's gaze cut toward Laila. "We anticipate problems here," Victoria said lightly, "by removing the people who make them." Laila held her ground. "Mistakes keep arriving from hands. You aren't watching." Charlotte leaned in a doorway later, nails gleaming. "Hard week?" "Work is steady," Laila said. "Reputation is not," Charlotte replied, flipping a notice on the staff board. "One rumor opens doors you do. Not one opened." She tucked a boutique's card into the cork and smiled as if she had offered help. That evening, Nathanial hovered at the kitchen threshold, palms in his pockets to occupy restlessness. "My mother wants structural changes," he said. "You mean replacements?" Laila answered. "She uses broader words. I am asked to support them." They drank water because the air felt too heavy for anything else. A moth battered the porch bulb until it found darkness. Laila breathed and pictured her notebook. "I am not leaving because lies make noise," she said. "I leave when truth has no room to stand." "I don't want you to go," he said. "Then stand beside something you believe." Not a plea, a sentence with its own spine. Before sunrise, she found a box of crystal nudged to a dangerous edge and slid it back. Later, in the greenhouse, a sprinkler sputtered. Nathanial knelt with a wrench and frowned at the valve. "How can a hotel contract be easier than a pipe?" he asked, laughing at himself. "Pipes don't flatter," she said, turning the handle. With him until the water steadied. He straightened, and for a breath the house felt smaller than the sky. Victoria hosted a tasting that night. A whisper spread that the pantry inventory did not match the ledger. Eyes pivoted toward Laila as if pulled by a magnet. She lowered her shoulders a fraction, then lifted her chin. She passed canapes without a tremor. Her tray never tilted. After midnight, she rinsed the last glass and listened to the quiet settle like fresh linen. Nathanial returned to the doorway with his resolve visible. "I told her the cruelty ends," he said. "I told her she will not strip you again." Laila watched her reflection shiver in the steel basin. "Will that hold?" "It's a start," he said, almost smiling, and then the smile failed. "Pressure doesn't vanish. It shifts." "Then be a wall," she said. He stepped nearer, without crossing a line, acknowledging it existed. "If a wall is what you need, I can be that." he said. But I also need to be a person who is not afraid of his own house. Cicadas rasped, filling the pause. Laila dried her hands and set the towel with unnecessary precision. She thought of her mother's notes, bus rides with strangers breathing sleep, and the pink notebook protecting plain facts. She thought of how the kitchen had become a place where words could be true without spilling into performance. I am not a problem to solve, she said. I am a person doing work well. I will not shrink so others look larger. I know, he said. I am late to saying it loud. She nodded once. The fan clicked. The storm over the harbor had not broken, yet the air tasted like rain. Laila gathered cups and prepared for the morning while Nathanial learned how to remain without asking for forgiveness. Upstairs, Victoria slept inside her rules. Down the hall, Charlotte planned another seed. The city sang its hot metallic song, and in the kitchen, two people faced the same heat from different sides of a line and tried not to lie to themselves about what it meant. Charleston's dusk carried the weight of thunder without rain, a slow, suffocating pressure that settled over the Hawthorne estate. Shadows stretched across the marble floors, swallowing corners where whispers usually died. Laila Thompson folded linens in her small attic room, the fan clicking as it pushed warm air in sluggish circles. She had survived countless quiet cruelties, the sideways looks, the misplaced items, the spilled glasses that always seemed to be her fault, but she told herself she would endure because endurance was its own kind of victory. Tonight, she needed calm. She smoothed the sheet flat, aligning edges with precision, an act of order against a house thriving on chaos. Yet chaos had already been planted. Victoria Hawthorne's heels echoed earlier that afternoon as she slipped into the staff wing, a place she rarely entered. In her hand rested a sapphire bracelet, heavy with accusation. She paused in Laila's small quarters, where sunlight painted slanted stripes across the iron bed frame. She opened the top drawer, slipped the bracelet under folded uniforms, and closed it with deliberate gentleness. Her reflection in the mirror smiled, cold and satisfied. She did not hurry. She savored betrayal disguised as certainty. To her, justice meant control, and control meant eliminating anyone who threatened the pristine image she demanded. When the discovery came, it felt orchestrated. Charlotte Brooks, lips curved with false concern, accompanied Victoria into the attic corridor. We must check everywhere, Charlotte said loudly enough for others to hear, her tone carrying performance. Laila looked up from her folded stack as they entered without knocking. Is something wrong? She asked, voice careful, steady despite the invasive air. Victoria's smile was sharp. We'll see. She pulled open the drawer, lifted the fabric, and let the jewel catch the dim light. Gasps spread from staff lingering outside the doorway, summoned like moths. The bracelet sparkled against Laila's dark uniform, and in that gleam judgment sprouted instantly. Laila's stomach twisted, though her spine remained rigid. That is not mine. Her words were clear, clipped, yet disbelief already poisoned the space. Charlotte pressed a hand to her chest as though wounded by the sight. How disappointing, she whispered, eyes darting to others who drank her performance like wine. Victoria held the bracelet up, her voice ringing with triumph. Evidence needs no speeches. Laila's chest pounded, not from guilt, but from rage at the ease with which lies could be dressed as truth. She searched faces for one sign of trust and found none until Nathanial appeared at the landing, his eyes shadowed by the dusk sliding through the window. He took the steps slowly, measured, absorbing the scene with unreadable calm. When he reached the room, silence thickened as if awaiting judgment. Explain, Victoria demanded, holding the jewel between them. Our family's heirloom, hidden, under your garments. Tell us why. Laila raised her chin, shoulders squared. You placed it there, or someone did, under your order. I would never touch what does not belong to me. Murmurs rose, some scoffing, others uncertain. Nathanial looked at her, then at his mother. His jaw clenched, the vein in his temple visible. This proves nothing, he said evenly. Anyone could have placed it here. Victoria's eyes narrowed. Are you defending her? In private, yes, Nathanial said, though the choice of words cut sharper than intended. To the room, he added, we will discuss this further. He reached forward, slid the bracelet from her hand, and pocketed it as if neutralizing a weapon. Then he turned away, offering no public defense beyond that gesture. His silence stabbed deeper than open condemnation. The staff scattered, whispers clinging to the hallway walls. Laila's throat tightened as she met Nathaniel's gaze one last time before he left. His eyes held conflict, but conflict did not erase abandonment. She closed the drawer, pressed both hands flat against the wood, and inhaled. The fan above clicked in a steady rhythm, mocking the irregular beat of her heart. Later, in the kitchen's dim light, Nathaniel returned. His tie hung loose, his posture weary. I cannot counter her openly yet, he said. You know how fragile the balance is. You cannot stand for me in front of them, but you will whisper support in the shadows, Laila answered. Her voice was calm, though sorrow curled beneath every syllable. Do you know how that feels? To be humiliated publicly and comforted secretly? My dignity is not a switch you turn on and off when convenient, he winced. I want to protect you. Protection requires courage, Nathaniel. No hesitation. She placed a cup of coffee between them, though neither reached for. And if truth dies in silence, lies will flourish. He bowed his head. I will find a way. She studied him, then shook her head slowly. Do not promise what fear will not let you keep. When he left again, her resolve hardened. She opened her notebook and recorded the time, the placement, the witnesses, each detail a defense she would wield when words were twisted. She did not cry. Tears were too easily weaponized, too easily dismissed as weakness. She chose steel instead. That night, Charleston's humidity seeped into every wall. The city breathed hot air through open windows, carrying cicada drones and the faint echo of church bells. The estate mirrored the storm gathering over the harbor. In the distance, thunder rolled like warning drums. Laila stepped onto the back porch, wrapped in stillness, her gaze lifting to the heavy clouds. She whispered not a prayer, but a promise. She would not be broken. Her thoughts sharpened into defiance. Betrayal had not destroyed her. It had revealed her enemy's desperation. She pictured Victoria's smug certainty, Charlotte's sly glances, and Nathaniel's silence, then locked each image into memory as fuel. A storm was coming, and storms cleared rot from trees. By morning, rumors had spread across Charleston's drawing rooms. The maid caught stealing, voices whispered behind lace fans and polished cigars. Victoria's plan had taken root, yet beneath the soil a different truth was germinating. Laila held her tray higher, met eyes without flinching, and carried herself with unbroken grace. Some guests avoided her, others stared longer, uncertain now whether to trust the narrative. Doubt was small, but doubt could grow. She knew resilience was not loud. It was steady, patient, a drumbeat beneath the noise. Each step she took through the mansion's humid halls became a statement. I am still here. Each refusal to cower declared survival. She had no wealth, no platform, but she possessed something untouchable, self-respect sharpened into defiance. In the stillness of her room that evening, she wrote a single line beneath her detailed notes. They tried to bury me in lies. I will rise with truth. She closed the notebook, placed it under her pillow, and exhaled into the damp Charleston night. Her fight was not for validation from those who despised her, but for the preservation of her own worth. Yet she also knew her struggle mirrored countless, unseen battles carried by people silenced by power. That knowledge lit her heart with quiet fire. The storm outside broke at last, rain striking cobblestones, lightning slicing the sky. She listened and felt the rhythm as if nature itself declared her strength. Her voice, soft but firm, carried into the shadows. This will not end me. And to those watching her story unfold, do you feel her fight? Comment, justice for Laila to stand with her, to remind the world that dignity cannot be erased by lies. Charleston's rain arrived before dusk, sweeping from the harbor in dense sheets that bent the live oaks and drummed on iron balconies. By the time lamps buzzed along South Battery, the Hawthorne estate had turned into a box of reflections. Water on panes, water striping the walk. Laila Thompson finished polishing silver and leaned against the pantry door for one breath, granting herself the smallest island of stillness. Footsteps crossed the tile, voices pressed low. A storm outside, a different storm inside. Charlotte Brooks chose her hour carefully. In the music room, she entertained two patrons while a pianist tested soft arpeggios. She lowered her voice and unfolded a clipped article. Staff are so hard to vet, she sighed, especially when someone relocates to escape embarrassment. She let the headline breathe, then tucked the paper away with a pained look, as if discretion hurt. By tea's end, the rumor had legs. By sundown, conversations thinned whenever Laila entered a room. In the dining room, a junior advisor murmured, "Apparently there was an incident before Charleston." Laila kept moving, tray balanced, pulse, tight yet steady. She understood how lies travel. They borrow real details and arrive wearing the right clothes. Dignity demanded forward motion, not defense. Nathanial Hawthorne traced the workmanship of the lie from the opposite side. The groundskeeper told him quietly in the mudroom, rain chattering on the eaves. Your mother and Miss Brooks walked the staff hall before lunch. They entered the maid's room and came out satisfied. Nathaniel pictured the planted bracelet, Charlotte's delicate gasp, his own public silence. He checked the study logs and found a gap that matched the timing. The realization tasted like rust. He swallowed it and felt the sting in his throat. Certainty did not deliver courage. Outside, the streetlights flickered, painting the flooded stones. He stood by the rain-laced window listening to the clock grind seconds while he weighed the cost. Family demanded unity. Investors demanded stability. Speak now and split his life, or wait for a cleaner angle. He wanted to carry Laila into the storm, yet he stayed with his ledger of consequences. Victoria appeared in the doorway, crisp even at night. Shall I assume the situation has clarified your position? It has clarified yours, he said. You will manufacture sin to protect face. Her mouth barely moved. I corrected a risk. The foundation cannot withstand a servant's scandal. She is a person, he answered, not a lever for your reputation. Victoria studied his hesitation the way a jeweler studies flaws. You will not act, she concluded, tender as frost. You will preserve our name. After she left, he sagged against the desk. Bravery felt distant. Calculation clung. Streetlights buzzed and flickered outside, throwing ragged halos across slick cobblestones. Laila crossed the courtyard with an umbrella punched wrong side out by the wind. In the staff lounge, talk stopped. A radio whispered. Eyes slid away and the gap around her widened like a drawn curtain. She hung her cardigan, ignoring the new distance. Charlotte lounged near the window. Hard week? Work is steady, Laila said. Past shadows are tricky, Charlotte replied. They stretch. Some storms are engineered, Laila answered, calm as stone. After supper, Laila climbed the back stairs. Her door stood slightly ajar. She told herself it was the draft. Inside, the small room smelled of starch and lemon oil. On the pillow lay an unmarked envelope. Caution said, leave it. Pride said, open it, standing tall. She slid, a finger beneath the flap. The paper bore the study crest. The handwriting was Nathaniel's, precise yet shaken. Laila, I should have spoken. Silence feels safer because it spreads the cost onto people who never chose it. You deserve open loyalty. I am ashamed of my arithmetic. I do not know how to undo the harm, but I know what stays true. I care for you. I tried to bury it under duty. It is there when I wake, and there when I fail to sleep. If I must choose, I will choose you. It will not be tidy. It will be real. The note trembled only because her hands trembled. Thunder rolled along the rafters. She read again, slower, letting meaning settle where doubt had camped. He had confessed affection and responsibility and offered a promise he might not know how to keep. She folded the page and pressed it to her chest, not as a rescue, but as air. Even if public courage failed tomorrow, this sentence existed now. I will choose you. Hope rose like a small flame that the rain could not drown. Downstairs, a staged encounter blossomed to feed the rumor. Two patrons returned through the downpour to retrieve a forgotten umbrella. In the foyer, Charlotte accidentally spilled a velvet pouch at Laila's feet and apologized loudly. One pearl rolled beneath the console table, precisely where a camera, conveniently installed for a restoration diary, framed the scene. Oh dear, she laughed. Such clumsy hands lately. The patrons exchanged looks, absorbing the performance as truth. Nathanial saw the clip almost immediately. Charlotte made sure of it. We were documenting the cornice, she texted with a cheerful emoji. He watched Laila kneel without fuss, refused to perform innocence for eyes. Already convinced of guilt and shame lanced him for every second he had waited. He wanted to shatter the mirror just to stop seeing the man who wore it. The storm pressed harder, turning sidewalks into moving ribbons. Laila carried fresh linens wrapped in plastic across the courtyard, looked up at the hammered sky, and whispered, I am not your fiction. In a guest room where the sash rattled and the air smelled of old wood, she made the bed with exacting care. Precision was rebellion. Nathanial climbed the main staircase and stopped halfway, listening to the building as though it could advise him. Doors thudded. From the parlor came his mother's measured voice arranging tomorrow's narrative. He pictured Laila holding the note, Charlotte's satisfied glance, and his own empty hands. He turned toward the staff wing before retreat could harden. At Laila's door, he knocked once and waited. When she opened it, he saw the letter on the A nightstand, crease sharp, held down by a smooth shard of sea glass. Relief and guilt arrived together. She stepped aside to let him enter. He stayed at the threshold as if crossing would require courage he had not fully gathered. I read it, she said. I meant every word, he answered. Meaning and risk are not the same. I know, he said. He looked at her damp shoes and the disciplined calm in her shoulders. I will not let them destroy you. You cannot stop their mouths, she replied. You can stop lending them your silence. Lightning limned the room in quicksilver. In that light, his posture shifted. I am done waiting for the clean angle, he said. Good, she answered, because they're already staging the next scene. As if cued by an unseen director, a crash sounded below, another contrived mishap collecting witnesses. They stood in the doorway listening to the house perform. Rain clawed at the eaves, streetlights flickered again. In the flicker, a choice took shape, sharp and unavoidable. Neither moved yet, but the world around them had. The night had teeth. It would bite. And this time, he intended to bleed for something that deserved it. Charleston's annual preservation ball unfurled inside the Hawthorne estate with strings, perfume, and the hollow promise of grace. Lanterns threw honeyed halos across the veranda while a slow river of donors drifted through arched doors, satin, whispering over marble as diamonds burned under chandeliers. The storm had rolled offshore, yet its damp breath clung to the halls, sticking to lungs and temper. In the service corridor, Laila Thompson stacked pressed napkins and told her hands to stay steady, because steadiness felt like the only shield left. Victoria Hawthorne descended the central stair with practiced serenity. Silver gown fitted like, armor smile honed to make obedience look like affection. Charlotte Brooks hovered at her shoulder, glossed lips prepared to deliver sympathy for cameras. Nathanial Hawthorne stood near the balcony doors, tuxedo immaculate, gaze unsettled, as if the heavy air issued private challenges. When he glanced toward the corridor, Laila met his eyes for half a breath, then returned to her list. He shifted forward, halted, and slid his hands behind his back as if binding them himself. The fireworks of humiliation had been prepared hours earlier. A seamstress had been summoned to adjust a hem. A small stitch at the bodice of Laila's uniform had been clipped to weaken the fabric without leaving a visible trace. A lens concealed among lilies beside the courtyard fountain had been angled to catch shock in perfect light. Victoria wanted a narrative that would polish her control and erase dissent with one clean spectacle, the kind elites remember as order rather than cruelty. Near 11, a patron misplaced an antique brooch. Charlotte found an opportunity before the owner found calm. "How dreadful," she murmured, palm over heart, eyes sweeping the hall until they reached the tray in Laila's hands. "Perhaps our diligent staff can assist." A dozen faces turned. Laila answered evenly, "I'll help search." She circled the perimeter, checking chair skirts, the terrace, and the dance floor's edge where pearls sometimes rolled. The Ade brooch appeared beside a palm, but appetite had already chosen a different story. "Stop," Victoria said, voice sharpened for performance. She stepped into Laila's path, lifted 2 fingers, and signaled the quartet to fall silent. Notes died, midair. Conversation sank. "There have been troubling incidents. Tonight we require transparency." She reached without warning, seized the collar of the black dress, and yanked. The weakened seam surrendered with a brutal rip. Cloth split across the bodice, exposing cotton beneath, scraping hot against skin. Gasps rushed like leaves before. The wind. Phones lifted, red lights blooming. Laila's breath caught short. She crossed her arms to cover the tear, heat climbing her cheeks, not from shame, but from the helpless fury of being stripped of choice in bright light. "That is enough," she said, tone measured, volume low, so dignity would not shatter. Victoria held the torn edge high as if raising a trophy. "We do not tolerate theft, deceit, or impropriety," she declared, turning so every lens could catch her polished outrage. "Search her." The command landed like a gavel on stone. Nathanial moved, then stopped. Eyes swung toward him, waiting for judgment. Beyond the windows, lightning flickered far offshore, a pale echo of the violence inside. He opened his mouth, closed it, and let calculation, loyalty, fear, and love collide until silence pinned his tongue. Laila saw it happen. The failure cut deeper than the rip. In a life built on numbers and influence, he chose stillness, and stillness betrayed more than any sentence uttered in a careful baritone. A guard stepped forward, uncomfortable, hands lifted in apology. "Miss, please," he said. Laila looked at the floor, catching the chandelier's cold fire. In that glitter, her reflection seemed distant and small. "No," she replied, voice straight as a plumb line. "You will not touch me." Victoria's smile thinned. "Refusal speaks loudly." She gestured toward the sideboard. "Check the tray. Check her cart. Check every pocket. We defend standards here. The guard hesitated, then stepped back, grateful for any excuse to retreat. A guest bent near the palm and lifted the brooch with sheepish relief, but the hall had already swallowed reason. People had traveled for music, influence, and gossip. A solved mystery could not compete with the theater of condemnation. Laila stood upright, though her arms trembled against raw fabric. She wanted to turn and leave, yet understood walking. Away would feed lies for those who craved confirmation. Remaining hurt more, yet remaining felt like the only way to protect the truth of herself. Charlotte whispered to a cluster by the fountain. Such restraint. One wonders what restraint. Hides! The sentence slid toward the cameras and stuck. Humidity tightened, suffocating like a cloth over a mouth. Sweat gathered along Laila's hairline. The quartet drifted into uncertain quiet. In that hush, she heard the faint scrape of Nathaniel's shoe on stone, the sound of a man stepping, stopping, reconsidering, stopping again, captive to the arithmetic of consequence. Tears pressed despite will. She blinked hard and lost the battle. A single drop loosened and fell. It struck the marble with a tiny click she felt through her shoes, as if the floor itself noticed. Another followed, then another, each carrying the weight of nights spent, proving what should never require proof, of mornings recorded in a notebook because memory would not be granted credibility, of hope that had asked for action and received whispers. She had promised not to cry in front of them. Tonight, the promise broke. Nathaniel's silence became a wall she could not climb. She watched him choose it again, jaw tight, fingers curled at his sides. With every second he surrendered ground he might never reclaim. She had believed him when he said he would choose her. Belief now felt like a bruise touched by every glance. He looked at her with pain dressed as love that still resembled surrender. Under chandeliers, tenderness turns into theater the moment courage refuses to appear. Victoria lowered the fabric, satisfied that harm had been transmitted to every corner. "Return to your station," she said, soft and lethal. "We will discuss employment tomorrow." Laila tasted metal. The room tilted, or maybe breathlessness tilted her, while the chandelier stayed steady. She gathered what remained of the seam, pressed it closed with a palm, and stepped backward, refusing to deliver the collapse the cameras demanded. She walked to the sideboard, lifted the tray with controlled hands, and set 3 glasses in perfect alignment. Guests parted as she moved, creating a corridor not of respect but of contamination. She placed each glass where it belonged and counted in her head to force rhythm over panic. 1, 2, 3, 4. By 8, the beat steadied her lungs. She would not look toward the balcony again. She would not feed the hope that refused to learn. She would complete the route because completion meant survival, and survival beat surrender even when dignity ached like a pulled muscle. Heartbroken for Laila? Drop a heart in the comments to show she's not alone. Near the arch, a draft met. The damp, a breath of night curling with the ballroom's perfumed heat. Laila stood in that narrow seam and let the wind cool her skin. A loose thread tickled her wrist. She pinched it and tucked it under. Practical as always. A waiter brushed, passed and whispered without looking at her, "I'm sorry." She nodded without meeting his eyes because looking would turn an apology into a confession that could spread. She reached the fountain and set the tray down for a moment, watching lilies tremble in conditioned air. Behind the petals, the hidden. Camera blinked. She faced its glass eye without flinching. "You will not break me," she said, too quiet for microphones. Her tears had dried to tight salt. The floor still remembered them, faint rings darkening the shine. Guests would forget. Marble would not. She drew a breath that hurt and did not release it until words formed with purpose. Music resumed, light and indifferent. Conversation surged. Victoria danced a flawless step with a senator and laughed on cue, already rewriting the night as proof of leadership. Charlotte hovered near Nathanial, murmuring fragments about stability, donors, and timing. He listened and hated himself for listening. He moved toward the service door, halted again, and stared at his reflection in the glass. Cowardice came dressed as prudence. He had worn that suit too long. Laila carried the empty tray into the corridor and stopped at a window filmed with ocean damp. The glass cooled her forehead. She let her eyes close. The world kept spinning, strangers kept smiling, and the city, outside, steamed beneath street lamps. She told herself she could still stand. She repeated the sentence until standing felt possible, then squared her shoulders and returned to the light, because disappearing would give them everything they wanted. She endured. Charleston woke beneath a gauzy veil of river mist, the rain-washed morning softening edges. By late afternoon, the hawthorn gardens breathed that moist air, releasing jasmine and damp earth. Laila Thompson stepped outside after resetting glassware and polishing brass. The night had been brutal. Today demanded motion. She followed gravel toward the fountain where lilies trembled. Fog threaded hedges and turned paths into pale ribbons that led forward. She needed to go forward. Charlotte Brooks paused in the terrace doorway, framed by pale stone and a drip of rain. Polished calm wrapped her like a shawl, a small notebook in one hand, a phone in the other. "There you are," she said. "We should talk about what comes next." "My steps don't require your permission," Laila replied. She kept her hands loose, shoulders relaxed, voice level. "However, I have questions you will answer." Charlotte tipped her head. "Careful, accusations travel." "Yours already traveled," Laila said, closing until perfume met rain. "You planted the bracelet. You told a seamstress to weaken my dress. You staged a spill by the fountain and placed a camera. You fed a clipped article to donors so they would think I fled scandal." Charlotte's lashes flickered, then steadied. "Imagination, not evidence." "I keep records," Laila said. "Timestamps, corridors, faces where hands carried what. I wrote down when you and Victoria entered the staff hall and left with empty hands because the object had already been placed. The seamstress texted you about the small snip near the bodice. She shared those messages. The groundskeeper archived restoration feeds. One shows you practicing the clumsy hands moment beside the flowers. I have copies." Charlotte angled toward the French doors. "Do you believe anyone will side with you over this house?" "Belief starts somewhere," Laila answered. "And when it doesn't?" "Then I stand without bending." On the balcony above the roses, a figure paused behind a curtain. Nathanial Hawthorne had escaped a meeting about donors and optics to breathe, then found voices below. He knew the cadences, Charlotte's studied sweetness, Laila's controlled flame. He stilled, ashamed to listen, yet compelled. Last night, his silence had bent him into someone he despised. Charlotte moved closer, smile sharpening. "Do you imagine Nathanial will choose a maid over a dynasty? He speaks tenderly in kitchens and votes with his bloodline in rooms that matter." "Then he must live with that mirror," Laila said. "I have chosen mine." Wind turned fog into ribbons. Laila slid folded papers from her pocket and held them. "You may deny everything until the board sees what I collected. Screenshots, a still from the fountain, and notes that match times. You made this necessary." Charlotte's mask settled. "Return what you stole from me, and I will persuade Mrs. Hawthorne to accept a quiet resignation." "No," Laila said. "I'll hand everything to Nathanial. Not because I need rescuing, but because the room where decisions are made requires light." Nathanial left the window, fog pressing against the glass like urging hands. He took the stairs quickly, the banister cold beneath his palm. Each step scraped away one layer of hesitation. He reached the garden door and opened it before fear, found another argument. The hinge sighed. Charlotte turned, flawless yet strained. Laila faced him with a steadiness that humbled him. He halted between them. I heard enough. Charlotte's mouth curved. Eavesdropping, Nathanial? Staging cruelty is worse, he said. Planting evidence, slicing fabric, spreading a rumor, aiming a lens, deliberate harm. It ends now. He looked at Laila. You were right about my silence. I won't repeat it. Then act, she said. I am, he answered, turning to Charlotte. You are finished here. Security will escort you to collect personal items in the morning. Access is suspended effective now. Legal will handle the rest. Charlotte lifted her chin. You don't control this house. I control enough to start, he said. The rest comes by telling the truth in the right rooms. She measured him, then looked at Laila with a thin smile. Enjoy your moment. She walked inside, heels clicking. The garden exhaled. Nathanial stood in the mist and let rain bead on his cuffs. You shouldn't have needed proof, he said. I should have stopped it sooner. I did what survival required, Laila replied. I prefer partnership to siege. He stepped nearer, careful with the space. I am choosing you, not quietly. Tonight I will call a meeting with the board and senior staff. I will place your records on the table and attach my name. I will say who arranged the setup and how. I will reject any request for patience that means complicity. If the cost arrives, I pay it. I will email the board within the hour and summon counsel. Your notes will be scanned and shared before anyone can spin them. Charlotte will look for exits. We will close them with facts. Laila studied the steadiness in his eyes and felt a knot loosen. The mist wrapped them, not as cover but acknowledgement, a seal that made the path navigable. A gate clicked beyond the hedge. Then walk beside me, she said. All the way in, all the way through. All the way, he answered. Cost will arrive, she said. You may lose allies who confuse domination with leadership. Then I lose them, he answered. I refuse the man who watched you bleed for my convenience. Lanterns hummed. Frogs called near the hedge. In that softened world, Laila studied him. Do this because integrity outweighs fear, not because you expect gratitude. I am done hunting, thanks, he said. I want to walk through these corridors without lying to myself. Fog thickened, beading on hair and lashes. Laila felt the earth's cool steadiness climb through her shoes. I refuse to break, she said. Not for cameras, donors, or a script written by people who treat lives like decor. If they burn everything down tomorrow, I will wake and be myself. You will not stand alone again, Nathanial said. I can, she answered. I choose not to, when standing together changes outcomes. He offered his hand, palm open. She waited one breath, then set hers against it. Recognition, not rescue. We go to the room where choices are made, she said, and make truth audible. We do, he said. They walked the path, shoes whispering over wet gravel. The house waited with chandeliers dimmed behind glass. At the threshold, he hesitated. After we speak, the storm moves inside, he said. My mother will marshal allies. Let her, Laila replied. I have witnesses, too. People who watched me work, staff who kept notes, directors who care more about results than dynasty wrangling. Charleston loves reckonings. The tide weighs in on anyone who pretends the river belongs to them. Those currents will bear weight when you step. A small smile found him. Then let's step. They entered together. Mist clung to their shoulders like armor, and decision sat bright on their tongues. Upstairs, a bell rang to summon an unscheduled meeting. On the landing, a mirror caught them side by side. Neither looked away. Defiance set the rhythm now, and hope supplied air. The garden door closed, and the mansion braced for weather arriving from within. Charleston's summer returned with velvet heat that slid through open doors and made crystal sweat beneath chandeliers. The Hawthorne Foundation Gala staged the city's oldest tricks: lanterns, strings, curated smiles. Outside, the garden steamed. Inside, air crackled. Laila Thompson steadied a tray near the arch, head high, shoulders squared, uniform repaired with careful stitches that refused to hide scars. Tonight would not repeat humiliation. Tonight would deliver reckoning. Nathanial. Hawthorne appeared at the balcony rail, tuxedo sharp, eyes intent. He had summoned donors to honor preservation and resolved to preserve something rarer: the truth. On the landing, Victoria Hawthorne arranged her poise, silver silk promising grace, while her gaze demanded obedience. Charlotte Brooks hovered, serene as ever. The quartet paused. Nathaniel lifted a hand for quiet, until only heat and expectation remained. "Friends," he said, voice clear, "we speak often about legacy. We restore wood and stone. Without integrity, that labor becomes polished ruin." Eyes moved from him to Victoria, then to Laila in the corridor glow. Nathaniel stepped down. "I failed to stop harm in this house," he said. "That ends now." A murmur rolled, uncertain. He nodded to an aide. Screens unfolded beside the orchestra and bloomed with still images. The first showed Charlotte at the fountain, a velvet pouch spilling pearls with practiced surprise. The izzat next displayed a message thread between Charlotte and a seamstress, discussing a small snip near a bodice. Another revealed logs from the staff hall matching the hour. A bracelet appeared in a drawer. "Nathaniel," Victoria said lightly, "this is not the forum for housekeeping." "It is," he replied, "because the harm was done here, under these lights." He looked at Laila. A member of our staff was framed, humiliated, and paraded as a caution. Evidence was planted, fabric weakened, rumors curated. Charlotte laughed softly. "You are reading shadows." "Then let's show more light," he said. A clip froze on Charlotte rehearsing the spill beside Lily's. Another showed Victoria crossing into the staff wing where she rarely went. Overlays placed her at Laila's door minutes before discovery. A hush gathered and held. Victoria's smile thinned. "You will humiliate your mother for a servant's complaint?" "I will hold power accountable for cruelty," he answered. "And I will name my complicity. I stayed silent while she bled for my convenience." He faced the room. "Silence is not neutrality. It is permission." Laila did not move. She stood where cool draft met ballroom heat, a fixed point the crowd could not bend. Her breath steadied as the images cycled. Staff stepped from the edges. A waiter confirmed the directed spill. The seamstress described instructions. Charlotte's calm faltered. "This is a smear." "This is a record," Nathaniel said. He turned to his mother. "End it. Apologize to her before this city." Victoria lifted her chin. "I protect our name. I will not kneel to theatrics." "Your name is not a blade," he replied. "It is the thing you mend after you do harm." He faced Laila. "You want legacy? Start with a sentence. I am sorry. I failed you when it mattered." Applause did not come. Something deeper moved. Breath drawn in, values shifting. Laila swallowed the sting and let dignity stand without leaning on forgiveness. "I am still here," she said, voice low yet complete. "You tried to crush me under a story. I chose to live outside it." The ballroom held still. Then Nathaniel spoke again, words stripped of hedging. "I love you." No flourish, no plea, just truth placed in a room that feeds on appearances. Phones lifted. He did not break eye contact. "I choose you over performance," he continued. "I choose you over donors who demand quiet cruelty. I choose you over fear." Victoria's control slid from the stairs like a dropped veil. "You will stain our line." I will clean it, he said, by telling the truth until it holds. He extended his hand without crossing the boundary she had defended all year. She studied him, weighed history, measured risk, and set her hand in his. Recognition. The room reacted in fragments. A senator clapped once, then again. A socialite exhaled an old prayer. Humidity thickened, sharpening perfume and linen. Effective immediately, Nathanial announced. Charlotte Brooks is dismissed and referred to council. All restoration feeds go to the board and press. Staff targeted by these schemes will receive an independent review and restitution. Any director who believes power excuses harm may resign by midnight. Charlotte started toward the exit and stopped as security appeared with quiet precision. Her gaze slid toward Laila, a final attempt at contempt. It missed. Victoria stood alone on the stairs, a queen whose court had turned away. The chandelier scattered rigid light across her poise. "You mistake spectacle for principle," she said. "No," he answered. "Principle is rarely polite." Laila stepped beside him, shoulders aligned, chin lifted. "I worked. I recorded. I endured. I will lead," she said, not as a request, but as a fact. If this house wants integrity, start with wages, safety, and respect for the invisible. Hands that keep it standing. The room shifted toward her voice. Directors listened. Staff straightened. Pressure changed. "You will have authority to set that standard," Nathanial said. "I will back it with my name and budget." The quartet found a brave chord. Heat surged and then released, as though the building exhaled. Laila felt the floor steady under her shoes. The polished marble where her tears had fallen shone without accusing her. "This ends," she said. "We build something honest, or we stop pretending beauty excuses harm." Deliberate approval gathered. At last. Nathanial lifted their joined, hands for a heartbeat, then lowered them with care. "Consequences will come," he told her. "Then we face them," she answered. "I will not vanish to make anyone comfortable again. Nor will I." He turned to the nearest camera. "My statement will be written tonight. No edits from donors, no euphemisms. Reporters called questions. He gave none the satisfaction of panic. Calm bloomed where dread once lived. She looked toward the balcony where the torn uniform had become a spectacle. It no longer owned her. "Inspired by Laila's courage? Like to celebrate her triumph?" The caption scrolled across a screen, the nudge floating like a small bright flag. Some laughed at the obvious cue. More answered it with simple approval that felt like a witness rather than noise. The quartet settled into a new tempo. Staff resumed motion without shrinking. The humid night pressed its forehead to the windows and seemed to listen. "Legacy is not marble," Nathanial said. "It is how people remember rooms where they were hurt or healed." He faced Laila. "Let's make this house a place where truth can breathe." She squeezed his hand once, firm. "Then open every window," she said. "Let the city feel it." Outside, the garden answered with cicadas and wet leaves. Inside, the chandelier glittered without menace. The crowd, stunned a minute before, found itself changed by honesty. Gossip fled. Respect lingered. Laila and Nathanial moved forward together, not toward a platform, but toward the nearest group of staff waiting with guarded hope. The night did not cool, yet the heat felt different now. Conductive instead of suffocating, a current carrying them into the future they had chosen to announce in front of everyone who needed to hear it. Charleston woke to a gold-washed horizon, the harbor quiet as a held breath. After a night of truth under chandeliers, the city felt rinsed. Cicadas subsided, gulls drew low arcs, and the Hawthorne estate opened its shutters to let fresh air move through rooms where shadows had gathered. Laila Thompson poured coffee in the kitchen and watched light climb the mossy oaks beyond the window. The marble that remembered tears now shone without accusation. She held the warm mug, grounded by its weight, and listened to pipes tick and floorboards settle as if the house itself were admitting what it had concealed. She breathed, not cautiously, but fully, then set the cup down and tied her apron with calm fingers. Today would not erase pain. It would give shape to repair. News moved faster than tides. By noon, envelopes stamped with Victoria Hawthorne's. Crest returned undelivered. A preservation league postponed her luncheon, citing a values review. A museum donor withdrew a pledge tethered to her presence. Along King Street, conversations shifted. People who once praised her poise now murmured about harm, repair, and the cost of curated cruelty. Some did it for optics, some for conscience. Yet the effect matched, a turning away that left silence where deference had stood. Victoria kept her posture, but rooms no longer arranged themselves around it. She moved through bright spaces and found brightness colder. At home, she read statements that used careful language and heard the truth underneath them. Power had mistaken fear for respect. The city had noticed the difference. Nathanial met staff and directors in the sunroom with windows open to jasmine. He read a plain statement and then listened. The seamstress spoke, the waiter spoke, the groundskeeper described restored cameras and an edited archive. Testimony became structure. Reporting lines, wage reviews, training that centered dignity, protections against retaliation, and real advancement. Budgets were assigned, deadlines written, and copies sent to employees and press, inviting corrections before signatures. By afternoon, the paths shone like mirrors. Laila and Nathanial walked between hedges, trading practical plans. He would brief counsel and push votes that day. She would draft clear memos and convene a rotating council of workers empowered to veto theatrics disguised as tradition. At the fountain, he said, "I kept calling it a hesitation strategy." She answered, "We cannot edit history. We build a future that refuses to repeat it." Quite confirmed what pressure tried to smother. Her answer came in two parts. First, boundaries. The partnership would not ask her to dim herself, soften her voice, or hide history. Second, dreams. Study nights in a quiet library, dawn trips to the marsh, apprenticeships so young workers could manage houses rather than dust them. He listened without rescuing, learning the map of a life he hoped to share. They sealed it with lists and calendars, not ceremony. Hope settled, not as glitter, but as steadiness. Elsewhere, Victoria met unfamiliar air. At a luncheon, she found chairs shifted away as if reputation could stain upholstery. An editor avoided her gaze. A senator's spouse offered politeness that stopped at the syllable. Back at the estate, she faced the landing mirror that had always reflected control. A question lived where certainty had stood. If legacy depends on fear, what remains when fear dissolves? No reply came, only quiet. Evening softened the garden. Nathanial found Laila writing on the back steps. He sat beside her until she closed the notebook and smiled. "I brought something," he said, offering a small tin of sea glass gathered on long walks. Pieces made smooth by time and water. Proof that rough things can become gentle without losing shape. She arranged blue, green, and milk-white shards on the stairs between them like a small horizon. That night, they visited her mother, whose apartment was bright with plants and modest photographs. Her mother listened, then hugged Nathanial with a firmness that tested intent. "If you love my daughter," she said, "you will love her power." He repeated the sentence without flourish. They ate stew while the city hummed beyond the window, simple and alive. When they left, Laila tucked her hand through his arm, not for balance but for companionship, and he understood the difference. days braided into routine with new weight. The council met weekly, and changes appeared on post-it schedules, in safety gear, and on payslips. Training shifted from lecture to practice. Respect became habit, not slogan. Laila mentored a young housekeeper aiming for conservation, teaching note-keeping like a craft and truth-telling like daily maintenance. When a reporter called, she declined a portrait and offered one quiet conversation on a park bench. She spoke about process, courage, and the usefulness of paper, of no grand declarations, only steps that could be repeated by other hands in other rooms. On Sundays, they walked the Battery at sunrise, bricks glowing while spires sharpened against a clean sky. They argued softly about coffee, traded lines from books, and planned a ride to a barrier island where sand sang underfoot. Love arrived as steady care, shared umbrellas, a coat over shoulders, laughter that opened windows in a tired room. They practiced repair. Letters began to arrive, addressed to Laila. Some came from housekeepers who had endured similar rooms. Others came from students seeking a gentler path into preservation. She answered with sincerity and encouragement. In closing, the simple template she had created for documenting harm and progress. She never called herself a savior. She wrote about practice, patience, companions who refuse to look away, and archives that keep honest memory. One evening, Victoria knocked on the kitchen door. The room held its breath. She entered without command in her shoulders. "I came to say words I should have said under lights," she told Laila. "I am sorry. I did harm because I feared becoming irrelevant. Fear excuses nothing." Laila considered her and nodded once. "Change requires upkeep," she said. "Like any house?" Victoria asked where to begin. Laila pointed to the list on the corkboard and assigned the first task, calling former employees to offer reinstatement or references without conditions. When Nathanial proposed, he did it at dawn on the seawall with nobody watching except pelicans, drifting across a pink sky. He promised partnership, not pedestal, and offered a ring beside a packet of signed policies. She laughed through tears, said yes, and tucked the papers into her jacket like a warm secret. The city woke around them, ordinary and bright. Their life unfolded in chosen rooms, a carriage house with skylights and a long table for friends, a library card tucked behind a framed photograph of marsh grass, a porch where they hosted staff, dinners that resembled family more than hierarchy. They disagreed, learned, apologized, and kept building. Love stayed active. A verb with sleeves rolled. Charleston's golden dawn kept arriving, molten on water, warm on brick, soft on Laila's cheek as she opened her notebook to shape the next right thing. Her journey, carried by witness and will, became a lantern for people she might never meet. Resilience, she wrote, is not hardening. It is staying soft enough to tell the truth and strong enough to act. Bells answered the morning. Boats pushed into the harbor. The foundation welcomed tours where guides told honest stories, crediting workers by name and showing how beauty and justice grow together. Laila and Nathanial stepped onto the veranda and looked toward the shining water. Behind them, a house, once ruled by silence, breathed like something alive. Before them, a day waited, bright and ordinary, earned, not assumed, together. Charleston wakes beneath a slow gold that turns iron balconies to lace and the harbor to liquid fire. And in that light, Laila's journey resolves into something steady and bright. She began as a target beneath chandeliers, a woman in a neat uniform forced into spectacle by hands that mistook cruelty for order. A seam split, a room gasped, and 1,000 eyes searched for a script that would absolve power by destroying a person. Laila refused to collapse. She stood, recorded, breathed, worked, and chose dignity when mockery begged for tears. She would not be written as evidence for someone else's story. She would write her own. Nathanial, shaped by soft rooms and careful deals, watched harm like a man counting rain from a porch, believing timing could be neutral. He learned the hard arithmetic of silence. Courage arrived late, yet when it finally stepped through the fog in the gardens, it did not flinch. He listened, admitted failure, gathered proof, and opened doors where judgment had hidden. In the second gala, truth stood taller than marble. Images replaced gossip, testimony replaced whispers, and the room that once devoured her dignity turned toward her voice. He spoke without euphemism, named his complicity, and declared love in the same breath as accountability, not as decoration but as a vow. Laila stood at his side without leaning on him. Recognition, not rescue, changed the air. Charlotte's rehearsed accidents unraveled under unblinking footage. Victoria's polish dulled when empathy woke in people who had grown tired of grace. That harms. Boards met. Budgets moved. Policies gained teeth. Doors that had been labeled private opened to voices that cleaned, fixed, lifted, and cataloged. Apologies arrived in daylight, not the shadows of hallways. The house began to breathe like a living thing rather than a stage. Still, the arc mattered. Beyond a mansion, streets carried it. On King Street, conversations shifted from gossip to standards. On the Battery, couples paused, looked toward the water, and let the idea settle that beauty means nothing if somebody bleeds to maintain it. Bells rang across the peninsula, ordinary and somehow new, as if sound itself had remembered its job was to gather people rather than separate them. Under live oaks, staff councils posted schedules that respected sleep, and training focused on skill instead of obedience. The porch lamps that once blessed silence now blessed transparency. Charleston's humidity, once a suffocating metaphor, became a reminder that air moves when windows open. Laila guided that opening with patience and precision. She mentored workers who had learned to disappear, insisting they be seen, heard, and promoted. She returned calls from students who asked how to enter preservation without surrendering self-respect. She answered with templates, examples, and calm encouragement. Document, corroborate, share, persist, and never trade truth for approval. She kept her own life grounded in small rituals. Notes at dawn, coffee with her mother, walks beside marsh grass that bowed and lifted with the tide. When cameras requested portraits, she declined refinement and chose conversation. Nathanial learned consistency. He convened meetings before trouble, signed safeguards before galas, and told donors that money tied to quiet cruelty was money the foundation could live without. He put his name behind wage changes and reporting channels, then stepped back so the people affected could speak for themselves. He did not advertise integrity. He repeated it until it felt like furniture everyone could trust. Victoria approached humility the slow way, stripped of automatic deference. Her apology carried no microphones and no rehearsal, and while repair would take time. She faced the list on the corkboard, made calls she once avoided, and began the unglamorous work of making amends. Consequences remained real, yet consequences finally served learning, not spectacle. Through it all, love refused theatrics. It arrived each morning as reliability and left each night as relief. Two people walked the Battery at sunrise, argued about which bakery sliced bread thinner, shared umbrellas when storms gathered, and drew lines they would not cross even for each other. Partnership became a practice rather than a pose. The mansion that once amplified humiliation now hosted staff dinners with long tables and easy laughter. Names were read at celebrations because invisible labor had been retired as a concept. Tour guides told whole stories, crediting hands that stitched curtains and restored cornices, explaining why preservation without justice is just a museum of someone else's comfort. Visitors left with programs that listed workers as contributors, not scenery. Children stood on steps at the end of tours and asked questions that sounded like futures. Laila kept certain mementos on a shelf beside her desk: a small sea glass shard, a folded note inked with vulnerable handwriting, a first printed schedule with overtime marked cleanly, a pay stub corrected without argument. None were trophies. They were reminders that change is built from particulars. She accepted speaking invitations only when they came from people who planned to implement, not perform. She closed with the same suggestion each time. Start where you are, invite witnesses, write it down, and be brave in public, not only in private. When setbacks came, she did not romanticize endurance. She rested, asked for help, and began again. Her mother teased Nathanial about overwatering herbs, then hugged him like a son. He laughed, learned, and set a reminder in his phone. So Basil would live. On Sundays, they hosted a potluck for staff and neighbors beneath strings of soft bulbs. Somebody always brought a new pie. Somebody always told a story about the worst old boss and the first good one. The porch held every memory without judgment, as if wood itself understood that healing is a human craft. When the sun climbed after those evenings, the city looked like a possibility. Boats crossed a path of melted gold. Church bells stitched mourning together. Magnolia honey rode the breeze. Laila stood at the railing, hands wrapped around warm ceramic, and felt the simple, enormous victory of breathing freely where she had once been crushed. Her path from humiliation to leadership did not erase the harm. It outgrew it. It did not ask her to become someone else. It asked the world to finally see who she had been all along. Nathaniel's promise held because he kept choosing it when nobody cheered. Together, they proved that policy is a love language when love insists on fairness. Together, they proved that rooms can change when the people inside them decide that truth matters more than posture. Let Charleston be your example. It did not become kinder overnight. It learned loudly, then quietly, and then in habits that stuck. The tides still rise, storms still roll in, yet the city keeps adjusting, and so can every house, office, school, hospital, and family that thinks beauty requires somebody else's silence. Laila's story proves that strength conquers hate. Like, share, and comment where you're watching from to spread her message. A harbor city listens to voices that carry. So do institutions. Carry yours. Carry hers. Carry the certainty that justice is not an event, but a rhythm you can join. A rhythm that turns heat into light and rooms into places where everyone is allowed to stand tall and breathe.